Hello everyone, today I will bring you a Thai BL drama The Miracle of Teddy Bear. This is a BL version of Toy Story, a story about a teddy bear who becomes a boyfriend. Tofu is a cute teddy bear, and his owner Nat is a screenwriter for a film and television company. One day, after Nat left with the lunch made by his mother, his dog Dahuan found strange noises upstairs. So, Dahuan quickly ran upstairs and rushed towards the teddy bear. Unexpectedly, at this time, the little bear turned into a handsome boy in an instant. For strangers, dogs will not let go. It chased and bit the bear and drove him out of the room without clothes and fell downstairs. Time quickly returned to 10 years ago. At that time, Nat took the cub home and named him Tofu, perhaps because of the master's tears. Tofu has thought and consciousness, so, no matter Nat is happy or sad, little bear will accompany him. At the same time, Tofu also met many new friends, such as Miss Bed Sheet, Mr. Chair, Mr. Notebook, and a series of conscious objects. These are scenes that only appear in fairy tales, but everything is so peaceful and stable. Until yesterday, Tofu suddenly turned from a bear into a human, and fell naked into the garden, where he was picked up by Nat's mother. But the kind mother was not surprised by this. She even thought that Tofu was someone who fell from the sky, and even took Nat's clothes for the little bear to wear. And the little bear Tofu put on human clothes, took off the little bear's bow tie, and just walked into the human world ignorantly. Mom finally thought of asking little bear why he fell off the balcony without clothes on, but little bear didn't know anything and couldn't say anything. He blurted out was the master's name, so the mother took it for granted that the little bear was her son's friend, and because he was white and tender, the mother gave him the name that belongs to Teddy Bear. Now Tofu is also called Tofu, but that's just about what happened to the kind mother, and Tofu hasn't met his irascible master yet. He knew that he might be abandoned if he became a human, so he tried very hard to turn back into a bear. So, on the night that Tofu had been trying to transform, Nat came home drunk. As soon as he saw Tofu, he called baby. Who can bear it? The little bear carried the owner back to the room and took off his clothes. When he touched the warm skin belonging to the owner with his own hands, Tofu was curious and surprised. Bear didn't leave after changing clothes, but hugged and slept with Nat as before. It wasn't until the sun rose the next day that they both woke up. Nat saw Tofu. He thought he was the one who brought him home, and wanted him to leave without anyone noticing. But unexpectedly, Mother not only knew Tofu, but also told Nat that he fell out of his bedroom. Nat was surprised when he heard this. Isn't this a thief? So he took Tofu to go to the police station. Seeing that the situation is not good, little bear pushes Nat away and runs away. Then, he ran, he chased, and the scene suddenly turned into Nat chasing Tofu by car. Then, the car of Nat and his colleague Xiaopa collided, knocking down Tofu. Immediately afterwards, Tofu wakes up in the middle of an argument between his mother and Nat. Mom wants to take him home, but Nat doesn't agree. He turned his head angrily and asked Tofu, "Who are you? From where? What do you want to do?" The poor little bear didn't know what to ask. At this time, my friend Abe couldn't help but ask, could it be because he was hit and lost his memory? Nat is speechless. He is the screenwriter. This plot is too outrageous. So he turned around and went to the doctor, but he didn't expect that the doctor would not rule out this possibility. Now, Mother insisted that Tofu stay at home, but Nat still disagreed. After all, he had done his best to send the person to the hospital, not to mention that he had to worry about his mother, which was really too much pressure. Seeing her son being so irritable, the mother felt aggrieved and a little scared, but she still insisted on taking Tofu home. The little bear saw that the situation was a bit serious, so he did something with the slippers. The hero rescued his mother and solved the current situation. In the evening, Tofu stayed in the hospital, and Mom and Nat went home. Seeing his mother's sad look, Nat compromised and took Tofu home when he was discharged from the hospital. Now, everyone is happy except Nat and Dahuang. Nat told little bear that it was his responsibility to do housework while at home, and he was leaving after recovering his memory. After finishing the family affairs, Nat came to the company, but his script was rejected again. and his little fangirl, Xiaopa, was always around him. Tofu at home? He got on well with his mother and greeted the equally conscious objects in the master bedroom. These are his friends. So, the magical things in this room discussed how the little bear should pretend to be human, but the conclusion was that they should do nothing. Tofu helps mom cook, but he can't do anything. But in this harmonious teaching atmosphere, De Huang was not happy, and it rushed towards the little bear again. So a bear and a dog successfully messed up the house. Mom had no choice but to call Nat. When Nat came back, the little bear was hanging on the railing aggrievedly, but he didn't teach De Huang the lesson. Instead, he suspected what Tofu did to the dog again. But my friends felt that Tofu didn't even have the ability to take care of himself. So how could he do anything? Nat thought so too, but his anger was still there, and he turned and went back to the room. This time, he finally found that the teddy bear on the chair had disappeared. Nat went downstairs to ask Mom, but Mom didn't know. Now he suspected that De Huang took the bear into the trash can again, so he turned around and chased after Nat, but Tofu was always behind Nat. He couldn't tell Nat that he was a bear, and there was no way to stop him. Nat finally catches up with the garbage truck, but the teddy bear on the truck is not his cub. At this time, friends also caught up, and they were amazed at how much Nat took him seriously. Nat had no choice but to tell everyone that this was given to him by a very important person, and Tofu watched all this from the side, moved, sad, and helpless. He could no longer be a bear. Tofu also doesn't know how he became a human being. He only remembered that that day he felt an electric current flow through his body, and he suddenly had a heartbeat. Then, De Huang chased after him. Maybe some people think this is a miracle, but for Tofu, he wants to be a bear more. On the other hand, Nat is still watching Tofu's video, trying to find some clues. At this time, Abe felt that Tofu looked familiar, and this kind of words also reminded Nat of a person, and that was his first love, Senior Dorian, the first handsome guy he saw when he opened his eyes after he was hit by a basketball. Sure enough, the two were exactly the same. Nat was still immersed in the memory of the senior, but it was Tofu that he could see when he opened his eyes. Of course the cub is going to sleep on the owner's bed, but this time Nat disagrees and drives Tofu out decisively. Tofu came to the new room and saw that there was not a single friend who could talk in the room, feeling aggrieved and helpless. So, he came to the living room, where the sofa, slippers, chairs, and even his mother's cell phone were all conscious. This made Little Bear feel a little comfort. The next day, the early morning sun woke Nat up again on the bear's abs. Is this a surprise or a fright? It turned out that Tofu climbed the window into the room last night in order to sleep with the owner. So, Nat got angry again, and he kicked the bear out. However, Little Bear didn't care. Although he was scolded, he stayed with his master for another night. In the morning, Bear and his mother are preparing breakfast, and their father, Sam. Nat heard the word father. She became very emotional and turned around to leave. Tofu hurriedly chased it out, but failed to catch up. Instead, he saw two neighbors and Joy. Little Bear greeted him politely and went back to his room. The rest is up to Joy to imagine. It turned out that the moment when Tofu fell down without clothes, and when he climbed into Nat's room, the neighbor saw them. So she's guessing that Bear and Nat have an unusual relationship. At this time in the hospital, a boy named Richard was lying on the bed, and Sam was talking with the doctor. Finally, Xiaopa also came to the hospital. It turned out that she was Richard's schoolgirl, and Richard had been attacked and fell on the railway. If he hadn't found out in time, he might have died. Therefore, according to Richard's last call, the police found Sam and Xiaopa to investigate the situation. But these two knew nothing, and couldn't think of anyone who would want revenge on Richard, except the company he had protested against. The investigation stalled. On the other side, Tofu and Mom are cutting apples at home, and Mom pretends to be talking to Dad. Just at this moment, when Nat came home and saw his mother like this, he lost his temper again and yelled out the fact that his father was dead, but the mother didn't believe it. After her son went to work, she was still having dinner with Sam and invited Tofu. It was only then that Tofu remembered that the object of Mother's conversation today was always air, and Sam was not there at all. But my mother still refused to believe it, and her emotions became more and more broken. At this time, the mother and son are very excited. Only Tofu is still confused. Nat turned and went back to the room, and Bear followed. But seeing the other party crying, he politely didn't go in. Although there is no way to accompany him like a teddy bear, Tofu still sleeps at the door of Nat's room all night to guard him. Little Bear is no longer the teddy bear he was before, but he still cares about his owner Nat just like a teddy bear. As a result, early the next morning, Nat woke up to find that his mother was gone. He was very anxious and hurried out to look for it. But at this time Nat's neighbor uncle called him and informed him that his mother had fallen into the water. Tofu also wanted to follow, but was pushed to the ground by Nat. Nat came to the water's edge anxiously, but found that it was not his mother who fell into the water, and he was relieved this time. But Little Bear got up strong and went back to the room. He was going to ask his friends for help, asking everyone to help him figure out what was wrong with his mother. But without further ado, the slippers really did send a message, and Mom took the old keyring before she left. Now Tofu knew that his mother must have returned to the old house, so he decisively called Nat, hoping that he would take him with him. But other than wondering why Tofu knew about this, the other party hung up the phone directly. Little Bear's friend also heard Nat's words, so he encouraged Little Bear to go by himself. And Little Bear met the neighbors when he went out, and got help from Joy. But when he arrived at the destination, he didn't wait for the other party, but walked into the old house full of memories in his own consciousness. And Mom really came here too. She saw the photos of herself and her husband, and also saw the locked room, and couldn't help crying. Bear also returned to his old home at this time. Nat's former room is really full of memories. Immediately afterwards, he found his mother in the yard. At this time, Nat also arrived at the old house, but when he saw Joy, he was very unfriendly, and Joy didn't look so easy to mess with. Seeing Tofu approaching, my mother didn't feel any dissatisfaction, but instead talked about her encounter with Sam. It turned out that my mother's grandmother was sick and made a wrong call, and Sam was on the other end of the phone. Instead of being angry, Sam asked for the address and saved Grandma. Thus, love is born like this, but now her son won't let her mention Sam, which makes her sad. Now she is also thinking about whether she is holding her son back. And at this time Nat also rushed over, but this time he didn't lose his temper, and gently called his mother home. But this time, the man, the bear, and the mother finally sat down and had a reunion meal together. Afterwards, Nat called Tofu into the room, and he still remembered the injuries suffered by the other party with a hard-spoken and soft-hearted heart. At the same time, Nat is also worried that Tofu will be angry, but our Tofu is a considerate little bear. He knew that Nat was worried about his mother, and he also knew that he didn't push him down on purpose, so he expressed his feelings by the way. In Bear's heart, Nat is the most important. Although he was shyly kicked out by the other party, Tofu still expressed confidence that when he turns back into a little bear, he will be that important bear again. The next morning, Mom prepared the food normally, but she didn't mention Sam anymore, in order to hide the little secret that his mother put in the bento. Tofu also looked at Nat directly. Everyone finally had a peaceful morning. Nat came to the company, but the bento was snatched by Xiao Pa. But fortunately, Mom's little secret note was snatched back by Abe. Looking at the words of apology written by her mother, and Tofu's crooked words, Nat was warmed up again, but the rice had been eaten by Xiaopa beyond recognition. On this day, because Tofu and Dorian Sr. looked similar, Nat took Tofu to the senior's house. Unexpectedly, Senior Dorian passed away in a car accident 10 years ago. Nat has not been in touch with the seniors for a long time, and the last meeting between the two was at the graduation ceremony. In order to give a gift to the senior who has a crush on it, Nat specially gave gifts to the whole class. Since this way is blocked, Tofu's life experience still cannot be confirmed. Abe and Amos left first, and Abe had to deliver Amos, and also took an order on the way. This pair of happy enemies met unexpectedly and started bickering, and Nat took Tofu to the temple to do meritorious deeds for the seniors. The little bear is just a bear and doesn't understand these etiquettes. He could only feel that his master was a little sad now, so he hugged Nat gently, but the location wasn't right, and Nat pushed him away. Tofu was a little sad. Why can he be hugged when he is a bear? On the other side, Amos sent Abe to the restaurant, but both of them were unforgiving people. Today is family day. Abe and his parents are still harmonious and happy, but unexpectedly, at this time, Amos sent a series of friend requests. Abe was very speechless, wanting to refuse and agree, but his father is amazing. He directly made the decision for his son. It turned out that the family members knew about Abe's sexual orientation, and they didn't think anything of it, and even made fun of his son. When he got home that night, Nat found that Amos had agreed to his friend request with his brother's account. Looking at the photos from the past brings back memories. Tofu was also communicating with his friends about today's situation. Everyone thought that the teddy bear was probably given by Dorian Sr. So, Tofu decided to find some clues from the master's friends. The next day, Nat's script started casting, but he forgot to take the lunchbox. The innocent little bear quickly chased him to the company, but was regarded by the staff as an actor who came to audition. However, the director, who hadn't interviewed a suitable actor, saw Tofu's white and tender appearance, and fell in love at a glance. This is his leading actor. But Nat pulled Tofu aside in astonishment, took the lunchbox and let him go home. But then the director quit. It's a waste for this handsome guy not to film, especially for a pure BL like himself. So he pulled Tofu under the camera. But a bear is a bear after all, and he doesn't know anything. At this time, Nat walked over. He wanted to know if Tofu knew what he was doing, but little bear doesn't care about these. He just knows that it's enough to spend more time with his master. The director saw that the two chatted for a long time, so why not have a scene with each other? So the smirking boy Nat went online, followed by the innocent and cute bear. I have to say that when two handsome guys are together, the picture is beautiful.
เต้าหู้ยิ้มหวานหวานกว่านี้เต้าหู้ไอ้นัท
The next step is to change the high school uniform, which is a new challenge for Tofu. After all, whose teddy bear wears pants? Who buys underwear for a teddy bear again? Tofu, who didn't have any pants, came out directly. Tofu was thus exposed to everyone. In this regard, Nat is both angry and helpless. Afterwards, he brought Tofu to the mall without stopping. But little bear has never seen a shopping mall, and wants to play everywhere, even the elevator.
ไอ้เต้าหู้ทำไมไม่ขึ้นมาบันไดมันเลื่อนนะฮะ
Moreover, the little bear can't walk when it meets a teddy bear. Nat can only look at Tofu helplessly. The two passed by the ice cream, but this time Tofu refused to leave. No way, my own bear. I pet it myself. However, Nat actually bought himself 2 scoops of ice cream. But how smart Tofu is. He ate Nat's ice cream and had another intimate encounter with the owner. In the company, the director knows nothing about the whereabouts of Nat and Tofu, so he can only make up his own mind. Tofu is too naive and passes directly. Just when he was upset about what to do with the actor, Amos appeared. Now abetting is not calm anymore. However, the director doesn't care about this, and Amos seems to be willing to do so. At the same time, Tofu and Nat are still choosing underwear. And by the way, let Xiaoxiong choose clothes for themselves. Tofu loves, though, our cute bow ties. Nat was speechless again. In order for Tofu to find him, Nat also bought him a mobile phone and saved his number. Just when the two entered the supermarket, Joy discovered the sweet moment when Nat was teaching Tofu how to brush his teeth, and took a picture of it for her mother. But my mother fled without surprise. Amos and the company ended smoothly, and Abe couldn't help but want to hit him when he saw this, and let him go for a takeaway. But Amos didn't care. He seemed to know that he was very attractive. He not only made Abe flustered, but also gained the love of the company's fans. After work, the lovelorn Airy asked Abe to drink, but ran into Amos again. We met twice in one day. This is the fate that we can be together. Although Abe still showed disgust, Amos was very happy. Only Airy, who was broken in love, was ignored, and she even had to watch from the side. And the first time the two kissed was also because of Airy, but the second time it was because of her. On the other hand, when Tofu and Nat came home, they accidentally discovered their mother's secret. It turned out that my mother had schizophrenia and would have hallucinations, such as being able to see Sam. so the doctor gave her mother medicine after diagnosis, but she found that after taking the medicine, Sam would disappear, so my mother secretly stopped taking the medicine. Nat, who finally understood why her mother hadn't improved for so long, collapsed. He was very worried about his mother and very sad, but his way of expressing it was too irritable. In the end, his mother could only cry downstairs, while Nat wept silently in the room. It was late at night, and Nat saw her mother sleeping on a chair with the photo in her arms. He has made a decision, so the next morning, my mother was confused. It turned out that Nat's father was not Sam, but Sam's twin brother Hedda. Moreover, it was not one person who saved mother and grandmother at that time, but two brothers. Is the situation? And Tofu was confused when he saw the same two people. Who was Nat's father? When her mother heard it, she broke down even more, and she locked herself in the room. But Nat couldn't vent his anger, so he had to point his gun at the little bear. Was beaten again, simply at such a chaotic moment. Abe, as a sober man in the world, stopped Nat and woke him up by scolding him, but at this time Tofu followed Joy back home. Unexpectedly, Sam and Joy are in the same family. This reversal is worthy of a Thai drama. To Joy, she and Sam have suitable personalities and suitable jobs. I wanted to go further, but Sam has a girlfriend now, but not long after, now married Hedda. She just developed with Sam, and when they got married, Nat was 2 years old. Tofu half believed, and at the same time when home full of doubts, Nat, who found out that his mother was off the medicine, asked Abe's family for help, and took her mother to the hospital again for examination. But this time, my mother's depression was very obvious, and she didn't want to talk to people at all. Nat had no choice but to retreat first, and the always warm little bear was waiting outside the door without any complaints. Nat felt guilty when he saw the wound on the corner of the other's mouth, and he carefully applied the medicine to Tofu. As for the little bear, he got the owner's inner thoughts in a second, and in this fragile moment, it is a great comfort to have someone who understands oneself. So, the occasion was right, and the warm Tofu hugged the vulnerable Nat again, just like when he was a teddy bear. Under such comfort, Nat silently cried out all her grievances. After such a hug, Nat's change is very obvious. A wrong decision created an unhappy marriage, and the one who got hurt in the end was the young Nat. Fortunately, he now has Xiaoxiong by his side, and I believe that with Xiaoxiong's company, he will be able to get out of the shadow. When Nat woke up smiling in the sun, the first thing he thought of was the heartwarming little bear, and the next second, little bear also appeared in front of him. Seeing a handsome guy, who wouldn't be moved? Just as the two were making eye contact, a mother's cry came from downstairs. She sprinkled ketchup on Da Huang. So, Nat and Tofu started to give Da Huang a bath. Bear was very proactive and sprinkled water on Nat, and Nat was not far behind. 2 people and 1 dog, water and bubbles, can fall into each other's arms. This is common in love and dreams. But the scene was quickly interrupted by Eri. Under the banner of asking for help from Nat, she came to Tofu to ask about Nat's preferences. Porous little bear, we still don't understand this. He even said that he didn't want to be Nat's boyfriend. He just wanted to be a bear. Heard by Nat not far away. Since Tofu was not interesting, don't blame Eri for doing it. She asks Tofu about Nat. As a cub who has been with his owner for 10 years, Tofu certainly knows it all. He told Eri everything, even Nat sleeping half naked. This can only be said, bear. I hope you will not regret it in the future. Of course. In return, Eri also tells about Nat's appearance that Tofu doesn't know, but in the next second, she found that all the gifts she gave Nat were on Da Huang's body. In the company, the director is announcing the actors who have passed the audition, and Amos bears the brunt. Abe didn't want to. He tried to change everyone's mind, but it was useless, and Amos teased him instead. Amos finished the makeup photo shoot smoothly, but at the end, he borrowed Tofu from Nat. It turned out that there was a basketball scene in the script, and Amos thought that his father missed Dorian very much, so he invited Tofu back home. When the father came home and saw Tofu, he was stunned. as if his son who had been dead for many years came back. But everyone knows that is impossible. And Tofu also has a question, asking Uncle Ani. He wants to know about Dorian Sr. Nat never appeared in their uncle's memory. They were confused. Who was he given to Nat? On the other hand, Nat also returned home, and saw that Tofu was not at home, and there was no news, so he couldn't help complaining. The child knew to run away when he grew up. In a blink of an eye, Tofu was sent home by Amos, but saw his mother fall from the chair and was rescued by Uncle Sam. But Sam didn't stay, and left after handing his mother to Tofu. Seeing Sam's mother leaving again, broke down and cried again. Tofu took her into the room. At this time, Nat also heard the sound and rushed over Tofu ferociously, but after being educated by his mother, Nat had no choice but to call Tofu brother through gritted teeth. Then the two went to change the light bulb together. I have to say, the two get along very naturally. But when Nat learned that it was Uncle Sam who saved his mother, he turned around and left the house. At this time, Sam's home was not peaceful either. When he came out, he ran into two people, Joy and Joy, who were noisy. Just then, Nat appeared again, so he took Uncle Sam away, leaving Joy hysterical. Nat remembered the time when his uncle came to his home, but was kicked out by his grumpy dad because of his jealousy. Looking at the gentle uncle in front of him, he thought countless times, it would be great if the uncle was his father, but everything can only be thought about. In the evening, Nat was taking a shower in the room, and Tofu came over with the washed clothes. The friends in the room greeted him one after another when they saw him, but at the same time sighed. The little bear became preoccupied and became more and more like a person. Tofu also deeply understands the troubles of being a human being, and he wants to be a carefree teddy bear. Just then, Nat came out after taking a bath. Seeing Nat with no clothes on, Tofu froze in place, and Nat was shocked, so he had to change the subject and ask Bear to iron the clothes. This is embarrassing, but that's okay. Nat is happy to teach him. Although on the surface he dislikes the cub's stupidity, he still teaches him hand in hand. Such a close contact, and the two of them are so handsome. How could it be possible not to be moved? So Nat got burned. At this time, Tofu remembered how his mother taught him to touch his earlobe, and he applied it vividly. Holding Nat's hand, he put it on his earlobe. It's over. It's a heart-pounding feeling. Both of them blushed and their hearts beat faster. Then the bear was kicked out. The friends in the living room saw the bear's appearance and confirmed the fact that his heart was moving. But Tofu doesn't understand. How can a teddy bear like its owner? But Tofu doesn't dwell on this matter. Instead, he decides to cherish the good time with Nat during his life. Early the next morning, Nat woke up to go to work, but Tofu prepared breakfast, and Mom overslept. Nat was very surprised, but the mother was a little annoyed, worried that she would hold her son back. But this is not the case. Tofu secretly added the doctor's medicine to his mother's juice in order to make her mother's illness better and to make the owner happy. And Nat came to the company with the bento made by Tofu, and for the first time did not give it to others. The little steak was shocked because the meat inside was all mushy, but Nat still ate happily. On the other hand, since Tofu kept putting the medicine in the juice, Mom's hallucinations started to disappear, and she started looking for Sam again. But fortunately, the witty little bear prevaricated skillfully. At this time, Nat, who had worked all day, came home from get off work. Tofu took the bento box, but found that it was still full. This made him a little sad, but he didn't expect that after opening it. It turned out to be a snack that Nat brought back for everyone. There are Moms, Dahuang S, and of course Tofu S. Tofu was very happy. On the other side, Amos is calling Abe. Even if the other side keeps refusing, he will not give up. The TV series will start next week, and the two will be able to meet again soon. Abe finally answered the phone, but with a bad attitude. But Amos doesn't mind. After all, being dissed by his sweetheart, he can still have a sweet dream at night. As the drama was about to start filming, Nat told her mother that she didn't need to prepare bento for herself, but my mother was a little disappointed. Seeing this, Tofu tried to distract her attention and proposed to make snacks together. As for Nat, due to a problem with the previously agreed venue, he even went around and went back to his school to shoot. And the person in charge is the teacher who accepted me here. This teacher has no respect for gender diversity and just doesn't think it's normal. So this hurt Nat more or less at the time. Now Nat is grown, strong, and powerful. He thought that his play might allow the teacher to understand different viewpoints and have different ideas. On set, Amos was filming interactions with rival actors, which made Abe a little jealous, but he is stubborn. If he doesn't say anything, he can only be jealous by himself. At this time, the director suddenly received news that the agreed basketball captain could not arrive. Just when everyone was struggling to find a solution, Tofu suddenly appeared in front of everyone. Amos knew his basketball skills, so Tofu was kept. When he put on his basketball uniform, he seemed to be back in the past. The little bear moved instantly. Is he really not related to Senior Dorian? Amos and Tofu are both very good at basketball, and it was a fantastic shoot. But at this time, Nat, who had just finished arguing with the teacher, came back and broke into the camera in a daze. This situation is really the same as before. What is the relationship between Dorian, Richard and Nat? Nat was saved by Richard at the beginning, but this time the basketball flew towards him again. But Tofu blocked it for him. Although Tofu saved Nat, Nat was still not happy. Because I saw the teacher back then, many unhappy memories came to my mind. For example, because I was bullied, and the elders didn't understand. Of course, there was also Richard's protection of himself at the beginning. On the other side, Abe was very unhappy watching Amos' intimate contact with others. This also caused him to directly vent his anger on the other party when he saw Amos, and even directly hit the other party's pain point. That is, his father's dissatisfaction with Amos. Now, Amos, who had been smiling all the time, finally stopped smiling, and he didn't even eat rice with everyone. At this moment, Abe panicked and stopped him to apologize to him, and Amos forgave him graciously, and even went so far as to ask his uncle to send him home. Abe was helpless, but also relieved. The exclusive driver took him home. Amos finally returned to his mischievous state, but Abe suddenly remembered that he didn't even eat dinner, and after struggling and struggling, he still got a delicious meal for him. When Amos learned about this, he was even more happy and proud, talking about love every day without exporting money. As for Nat, although De Huang is always doing assists and is attracted by the cute bear, he is still unhappy because his work is not going well. His BL script didn't look romantic at all, which didn't satisfy the director, so Nat had to shut himself in the room and study the script. Tofu was very worried and wanted to send him some food to replenish his energy, but the door couldn't even be opened. This situation continued for a while, and Tofu became more and more anxious, so Mom gave Tofu the key to Nat's room. Finally entering the room, Little Bear saw his sleeping master, and sat obediently by the bed, looking at what Nat wrote. But at this time, De Huang ran in, jumped on the bed, and woke up Nat. When Nat saw that Tofu was here, he was instantly unhappy. When he guessed that the key was given by his mother, Nat couldn't control his temper. Abe and Ari, who arrived at this time, were both shocked. But Abe, who knew the situation, still controlled the situation. It turned out that my mother had a criminal record before and secretly read Nat's diary. Seeing that his friend had so many bad memories, Abe suggested that he find a new relationship to make up for it. There are two good choices in front of you, Xiaopa and Tofu. At this time, Abe received a call from Amos, but suddenly there was no sound on the other side, and Abe ran away in fright. At Amos' home, he found Amos fainted on the ground, so he turned around and took him to the hospital where his mother was. Coincidentally, Dad was there too. Seeing his son bring a boy to see a doctor, the father directly showed a mysterious smile. Fortunately, there was nothing serious about Amos, just a bad stomach. In the evening, Abe was in the hospital with the noisy game sound of the kid, making the ward not so quiet. Perhaps it was in such an environment that Amos blurted "I love you" while lying on the hospital bed was so deafening. Abe was startled, although he pretended not to hear, but Amos was unafraid. A series of "I love you" blurted out, which made Abe unable to pretend nothing happened.
Lang na lung. Lang na lung. Lang na lung. Yut!
Sometimes, compared to the silent company of the little bear. Suppressing himself, perhaps speaking out loud like Amos would be more useful. From his mother, Nat locked up his world, and little bear was very worried. So, he wanted to help him, to make him happy, so he proposed overwriting sad memories with happy ones. It has to be said that this method coincides with what Abe told Nat. So, Nat agreed and proposed to date the two. This seems to be different from the little bear's cognition, but it doesn't matter. It's good to be with the owner. The two rode to the night market. Such a lively atmosphere made them blend into it. Although little bear looks like he has never seen the world, he is sweet enough. There was a free tasting of alcoholic drinks, and Tofu managed to get himself drunk in order to try out the best one for Nat. The bear on the bike was cute and happy, and Nat wondered why he wanted to come here. Actually, it all depends on the friends in Nat's room. This would have been Nat's dream. Although today's date seems not so romantic, the owner is very happy, and so is the little bear. Just when everyone was very happy, the rain came as soon as it was said. The little bear who has not been exposed to the rain is feeling happily, and Nat is also infected by this happiness. Seeing the owner, the little bear couldn't help but stepped forward to hug him. At home, after Nat took a shower, Tofu thoughtfully brought him coffee and brushed his hair. Nat was visibly moved. He didn't know if Tofu knew what he was doing, but Nat was moved. But at the critical moment, he hesitated, and finally failed to kiss her. When Tofu left the room, he found the heart drawn on the cup. So, he went to Tofu's room with the milk, but the other party couldn't wake him up no matter how much he barked. Nat touched it. He panicked instantly. Next is the familiar Thai body scrub. Tofu is really white and tender, and this situation also reminded Nat of the games they played together at the market, and the earthy love stories that belonged to the little bear. On the other hand, Abe came to the hospital to see Amos. Amos thanked the other party for his company last night, but Abe was stubborn and refused to admit that he was worried about the other party. But he still washed Amos's clothes and brought them back, which made Amos very happy. He jumped up excitedly, and then the two of them started laughing and fighting, rolling on the bed to their heart's content. Coincidentally, my parents appeared in front of the door in the next second. Abe also wants to explain the innocence of the two, but neither parents want to believe it. On the other hand, the little bear was taken care of by Nat for one night, and woke up in the arms of its owner the next day. The time went back to last night. Because of the wonderful experience, Nat was full of thoughts, but at this time he found that the little bear was shivering from the cold. So he took off his clothes and used his own body temperature to warm the little bear. At the same time, after a period of medication, my mother has gradually returned to normal, but she also begins to doubt whether her hallucinations are real, which leads to her being almost hit by a car, and it is Joy who got out of the car. She was also emotionally unstable at this time, and she spoke out all the grievances between the two of them. This made my mother very confused, and began to doubt whether her memory was real. And Tofu looked at all this, feeling a little guilty, but for Mom's health and Nat's happiness, he had to keep doing what he did. And Nat had a wonderful experience, and the director was very satisfied with what he wrote. He thought of the social account that Tofu applied for before, and wanted to record his own life. Nat finally picked up the phone and agreed to the other party's boyfriend application, and Tofu couldn't be happier about it. Abe also saw Tofu's activity at this time, and he was very worried about Xiaopa. Ari is really miserable. Every time she likes a boy, the other person also likes boys, such as Richard and Nat. Seeing Nat, Abe couldn't help but ask him if he likes Tofu. If he does, don't hesitate. But Nat is worried that Tofu is a stranger and will leave if he recovers his memory, so he hesitates. On the other side of the house, Tofu and Amos are chatting. He wants to know about Richard, but this Amos is not so clear. What he knows is that Tofu likes Nat very much and sincerely, because he blushed when he mentioned the other party. Cute Tofu, who doesn't want to touch it? Amos couldn't resist getting started too, but this scene was seen by Nat, who just got out of the car. Sure enough, he was jealous. When Amos saw Nat, he didn't panic at all, and invited Tofu to have dinner and play games. At this time, Nat was not far behind and invited Tofu to the film festival. What are the options for the cubs? This is simply a no-brainer answer. Nat was coaxed to great delight. The film festival will start soon, and Nat is very grateful to Tofu for his recent efforts and help. His success is inseparable from him. As a result, the hands of the two slowly moved together. But at this moment, an old man appeared between the two in a puzzled manner, but he can't influence Nat and Tofu's eye contact.
อะไรวะไอ้จอยทำไมเป็นงี้ทำไมตัดบทแล้วซีนออกวะ
After the film festival ended, the atmosphere between the two was still very sweet. Nat wanted to go to the bathroom, so he asked Tofu to wait there. But at this time someone took a fancy to Tofu's beauty and wanted to take a selfie with him. Nat saw that Tofu was taking a selfie with someone else, and he became jealous again, so he dragged the person away. Didn't soften until he got home. Bear kept asking behind Nat, and wanted to explain, and Nat finally couldn't restrain his jealousy, and told the fact that he was jealous. When Little Bear heard this, he had to do something, so he told Nat that he was not satisfied with just holding his hand before, and he wanted to hug him too. At the same time, he kissed Nat lightly, and said words with soft and sweet lips, like jelly, but who knows? When Nat heard this, his emotions suddenly became agitated, and he questioned who Tofu was and who sent him here, but Tofu didn't know what to say at all. So angry Nat took Tofu to go to the police station. Panic. Tofu accidentally wears off his mother's slippers. At the gate of the police station, Nat questioned Tofu's origin again, but Tofu still didn't say anything. So, the two came to the police station, and one of the slippers was left in place. The police accepted the report and are questioning the two men, but in name, it was a report of a stranger breaking into the house, but the two parties knew each other so clearly, the police were all stunned. Tofu thought Nat did this because he kissed him. Boiling now. Can you accept this kind of report? Of course it can't. So Tofu and Nat both came out, facing the host's questioning again. This time Tofu revealed that he is a teddy bear, but Nat not only didn't believe it, he beat the bear to the ground and drove away. Poor Tofu, just chased until the car was out of sight, and he couldn't catch up with the owner Nat either. Mr. Slipper suggested that Tofu find Miss Slipper first, but he was caught by the headlights before he found it. But the other party is not Nat, but Abe. Tofu was brought home by Abe. Abe's parents were a little surprised to see their son brought back another boy, but they still welcomed Tofu warmly. And Tofu also learned from Abe's parents. Nat's serious military father. Tofu was not used to living in someone else's house, but Abe doesn't know whether he can go back to Nat's house, because it depends on two people. However, the joys and sorrows of human beings are not interlinked. At the moment when Nat and Tofu were having a relationship crisis, Abe and Amos are interacting sweetly, and Nat was full of thoughts at home. He thought of Tofu, Richard, and his teddy bear, and early the next morning, he finally found the scarf that belonged to Little Bear in the drawer. Nat couldn't figure it out, so he confided to Abe and told him that what Tofu said was exactly the same as his ex-boyfriend. Abe couldn't understand it even more. He even suspected that Nat had persecution paranoia. He actually felt that Tofu was sent by Richard to love himself for him. Are not important now. What is important is whether Nat still wants Tofu to participate in his future life. On the other hand, Amos came to Abe's house, wanting to see who was living with his sweetheart. After learning that it was Tofu, he took Tofu back to Nat's house. He actually promised Nat that he would take good care of his mother, and Xiaoxiong didn't want to break his promise, and this time he came back with guilt because he lost Miss Slippers. At this time, the mother was tidying up her son's room, but saw a group photo of Sam, Hedda and herself again. Memories from that time came flooding back. Everyone has memories that made her happy, but now it's like this, seeing his mother so sad. Tofu couldn't help comforting her. Xiaoxiong's point of view is that there is no need to be afraid of nightmares, because you know it is a dream, and you will be glad that there are so many people around you when you wake up. The police were still investigating the murder of Richard, but Ari remembered that the senior once had a crush, so she followed the police into the room. Now, she finally found out that Richard's former boyfriend was Nat, and Tofu wrote a letter to Nat, put it on his desk, and helped him clean it up. But at this time, Nat came back suddenly. He was very angry when he saw Tofu in the room, and he was still holding the book related to the ex-boyfriend in his hand. Now he became even more irritable, and asked loudly who sent the little bear. Poor little bear doesn't know anything, so he can only say sadly that he doesn't need me, so I'll just go. Hey, Amos is right. Tofu has been with you for so long. Don't you know what kind of bear he is? In this way, the little bear became a homeless bear. Fortunately, Amos took him in, but at this time, Tofu remembered the matter of Miss Left Slipper, and asked Amos to take him to find it, but there was no trace of the slippers in that place yesterday. Just when Amos and Tofu were in a hurry, Tofu heard Miss Left Slipper calling for help. At this time, a dog is biting it. Tofu rushed over without looking back, but still failed to catch up. Instead, he threw himself on the clothes rack with a pile of underwear in his hand. In the next second, a group of ants flocked to him, shouting pervert, and were about to send him to the police station. Poor little bear, it's really hard to argue. And this wonderful scene was actually seen by Joy again, but this time she did something good and told Nat about it, which gave Nat a step forward, who was arrogant on the surface but worried about Tofu's comfort. But unexpectedly, when Nat arrived at the police station, Tofu had already been rescued. It turned out that Uncle Ani went back to Bangkok, checked the video surveillance, and proved Tofu's innocence. The rescue failed, and Nat went home depressed again, and found a letter that Tofu left on the table. The letter described the ending after the two kissed, but it won't be as sad as it is now. It's the sweetness of happiness. That's right, the two of them should have had a happy ending, just like what Little Bear wrote in his letter, but because of a meaningless guess, Nat kicked Tofu out again, and the two broke up again. After being driven away by Nat, Tofu not only became a homeless person, but was almost sent to the police station. Fortunately, Amos took him in. After returning home with Tofu, Amos took him to his brother's room. Although he has a place to live, Tofu was not happy. He didn't understand why he suddenly became a human being, and even became a substitute for others. Downstairs, Uncle Ani found someone sneaking outside the door, so he planned to catch the thief. Amos came out and saw that it was Nat. Knowing that he was looking for Tofu, Amos hurriedly told him to come in quickly, and the uncle couldn't help persuading Nat that Tofu was also a person with flesh and blood and emotions. He hoped that Nat would think about it before deciding whether to take Tofu back. At this time, Amos brought Tofu down, and the little bear instantly became happy when he saw his owner. Knowing that Nat is going to take him away, Little Bear obediently follows, and Nat took Tofu away, and also told him his inner thoughts. He wasn't sure if he would doubt him in the future, but Nat was sure he wanted to be with Tofu, but he will never forget his ex-boyfriend, and be scolded for such a speech. My poor and distressed little bear, saying that he would be obedient, he would prove his sincerity, and he would be with Nat forever. The two finally reconciled, not only the agreement of children to tick off, but also the agreement of adults to hug. Afterwards, the two finally made it home while Mom was already asleep. Nat took out the letter written by Tofu, and wanted to act out the sweet kissing scene in it, but our little bear didn't understand the style. He didn't get into the scene. This time, Nat was angry again, and he turned around and left. But even so, the two still felt happy, and Mother was very happy to see Tofu back, and Nat also promised not to drive him away again. The two people who have established a relationship are just different, and there is an ambiguous atmosphere circulating when they touch their fingers. After reconciling with Tofu, Nat was very happy even going to work, and Eri was even sadder seeing this, but she still did not give up and asked Tofu to meet. This time, Tofu knew what he wanted and told the other party clearly, but Eri still wanted to try one last time. She has a special birthday present for Nat. At this time, at the neighbor's house, Sam was arguing with Joy. Shell left. Sam wants to end it, but this touched Joy's bottom line, so she broke into Nat's house like crazy, forcing Na to remember everything. In the entanglement of the four, Na fainted directly under this strong stimulation. Everyone sent Na to the hospital. Nat couldn't help asking his uncle why he didn't marry his mother. And this is a love-hate story. In general, love is lost to stability. the previous generation started to make one wrong step by step. Nat, who learned the truth, didn't want to understand his mother's choice, but Tofu had a different opinion. He believes that no one chooses pain. At the same time, he also told Nat that he secretly put medicine in the juice his mother drank. The nervous bear thought he would be reprimanded, but unexpectedly, Nat hugged him and told Tofu that he understood Tofu was suffering. With Nat's understanding and care, Little Bear was really happy. He also finally realized the benefits of being a human being. Being able to hug and hold hands is really great. Soon, the mother's condition improved and she was discharged from the hospital. And Tofu also told her about the medicine in the juice. After this incident, my mother had an epiphany, and she wanted to end this nightmare completely and return to reality. So she asked Tofu and Nat to take her back to the old house. In this old house, all things from the past come to mind. There is love with Sam, girlfriends, and of course, grandmother's illness and Hedda's stable company. All kinds of things made her make wrong choices, which led to the current consequences. And Hedda was also very kind when Nat was young, but after finding that Nat was becoming more and more feminine, he couldn't accept it and began to become more irritable. The past is unbearable. Now recalled the past, and finally couldn't help crying while hugging Tofu. She hated herself. If she hadn't been so indecisive, she wouldn't have made the wrong decision. Nat, who heard these words from the side, felt cold for a while. Then he must be the product of a mistake. And this feeling lasted until I got home. Nat went back to his room, still sad. At this time, Caring Bear went online, served tea and water, and massaged. Not only did it not solve the problem, but it distracted Nat. Bear wants to leave, but Nat refuses to let him go. This is a proper thought of a young couple. Nat like this. Bear had an idea. Just when the editor was expecting something sweet to happen, Tofu actually took Nat to walk the dog and go for a run. Well, yes, exercise can change your mood. On the other hand, Amos and Dad want to practice playing, but Dad always mentions Tofu, and this feeling of not being taken seriously explodes in an instant. But Amos still suppressed his disappointment, didn't say a fierce speech, but turned to Abe for comfort. After meeting his sweetheart, Amos immediately returned to his mischievous state, began to act like a baby, begged for attention, and even suggested that Abe would date him if he didn't score a goal. But I didn't expect. Abe was very good, and the ball went straight in. Now, Amos was even more lost. Abe knew that the other party must not be sad simply because of this matter. So, after learning about his father, Abe comforted and gave Amos advice. The aggrieved Amos finally found his shoulder, hugged Abe and refused to let go. At this time, Nat and Tofu are enjoying the sun on the grass. The atmosphere is not too good, but when he turned his head, Da Huang was gone. It turned out that the dog was at the little girl's birthday. Tofu remembered that it was Nat's birthday in a few days, so he asked him what he wanted. Nat, who originally had no expectations for his birthday, has a boyfriend this year, so he naturally expects some surprises, but he doesn't tell Tofu what he wants. This gave Tofu a headache, and the same headache is Xiao Bao, who was also thinking about birthday presents. Finally, she thought of Nat's lost teddy bear, so she came to Tofu again and wanted to know what the bear looked like. Our Tofu was also very simple, and directly told Xiaopa. However, is it popular to inquire about the situation of the rival in love now? The friends in Nat's room also don't understand. Isn't Tofu afraid that a new bear will replace him? It would be great if it made Nat happy. On this day, Tofu saw his mother looking through the photo album, and the two discussed the rainbow cake that Nat asked for but never got when he was a child. Tofu had an idea in his mind. It's finally the day of his birthday. The Tsundere Nat wakes up early in the morning and starts to look for Tofu's gift, but there is none in the room, so he washed up and went downstairs. Downstairs, Tofu was waiting for him in a white suit holding flowers. Just when Nat arrived and was pleasantly surprised, Tofu woke him up. But the real situation is that the bear in the t-shirt is holding the bucket, which is very different from the dream scene. Nat had no choice but to come to the company full of disappointment, but a day later, the phone is still quiet. But what he doesn't know is that at home, Tofu and his mother have been busy trying to make the prettiest rainbow cake for Nat. It was finally time to get off work, and Nat planned to go home, but was left by the director to revise the script, and no matter how he changed it, he was unqualified. Unbeknownst to Nat, this was also Tofu's request. The cake isn't finished, so Nat can't go home right now. Finally, the director got Tofu's order and let Nat go, and Abe also sent a small snack to celebrate Nat's birthday. At this time, Amos appeared from behind him and teased him that he only had such a small piece of cake as a gift, and Abe said his gift is forever support. The two really bickered as soon as they met, but it doesn't matter, they can be in close contact with each other. Amos wanted to get closer, but Abe dodged it, but it doesn't matter, he can still see this little thought. After all, the little cakes that can be seen everywhere, if they don't want to see themselves, who would go all the way to order delivery? As for Nat on the other side, when he got home, he found the house lights flickering.
Happy birthday!
And Mom and Tofu actually made for themselves a colorful birthday cake 20 years late, which was the one that my father banned because the color was too soft. Although late, Nat is still very happy. At this moment, the sound of parking was heard outside the door, and Eri came down holding a teddy bear exactly like Tofu. She's going to give this to Nat as a gift and confess her love. When Tofu saw it, he panicked instantly. Is this going to replace him? Nat also found out about this, but now it's more important that he explain this to Eri. After all, she already has someone she likes, and Eri had expected it a long time ago. She just wanted an answer. Eri left. The courtyard finally returned to calm. Nat wanted to record the beauty of the moment, and the little bear also came over at this time. He wondered why Nat would reject a teddy bear of his own kind, but in Nat's heart, his own bear is the only one. Little Bear was very happy to hear these words, followed by his sweet coquetry, which made Nat's heart flutter instantly. He took the initiative to ask Tofu to sleep with him. The two not only kissed, but also shared the same bed and bathed together. Does this mean to go further? And with tonight, Nat and Tofu became closer, and the love made Xiaoxiong not want to turn back into Xiaoxiong. Sure enough, love makes people grow. With the nourishment of love, Tofu finally made progress, and he was no longer the Tofu who wanted to turn back into a bear. On this day, Tofu found that the furniture friend in the living room started to fall asleep unexpectedly. This made him can't help but think of his own situation, so he stepped up the pace of finding his own life experience. He asked Eri about teddy bears, and finally found a shop called Shinai, and that store was the one that Nat chased him to. Tofu, who was full of thoughts, did not leave, but waited for Nat to pick him up. Sure enough, when Nat saw this place, he avoided it. It turned out that the little bear really came from the shop named Beloved, and was given to him by his ex-boyfriend Richard, but at the same time, here, the love between the two was also discovered by their father. This memory is both happy and unhappy, so Nat doesn't want to touch it, and the little bear is also very well behaved. Nat won't ask him if he doesn't ask him. Finally, after learning from Nat that this place has something to do with his ex-boyfriend, Xiaoxiong even endured the jealousy silently. Fortunately, Nat told Cubs in time that he is the most important right now. Next, the two went to buy dog food hand in hand, and happened to meet Joy. The two met. They immediately started arguing, and Nat actually let go of Tofu's hand at this moment, although everyone ended up breaking up unhappy in the end. When Tofu wanted to hold Nat's hand again, Nat let go. Such behavior is very sad. In the middle of the night, Nat also realized and apologized to Bear, and Tofu also told Nat bluntly that there is no problem if the person he likes is a boy. After the double exchange of mind and body, seeing the two become more intimate, even the sheets left traces and needed to be washed. My mother smiled gratifiedly as she watched the two children play intimately upstairs. After a while, Tofu looked at the furniture, and his friends fell asleep one after another, which forced him to speed up the pace of investigation again. On this day, Little Bear found a new character in Nat's study, Richard, but at this moment, Nat came back, and Bear had to stop investigating. But he remembered that the director said before that the script was Nat's real experience, so Tofu wanted to get some information from it. Following the filming of the crew throughout the filming, Xiaoxiong seems to have integrated some information. Senior Dorian and Richard are good friends, they belong to the same basketball team, and Nat has always been secretly in love with Dorian who saved him. In this way, while thinking and integrating, Tofu actually met Nat's teacher back then. If it wasn't for the teacher's whistleblowing, perhaps Nat's happiness would not have ended so quickly. To tell the teacher who Nat's ex-boyfriend was, Nat arrived. He angrily yelled at the teacher and took Tofu away. In other words, Cobb found Amos while Nat was working, and got Richard's name and social account. While Tofu was watching with great concern, his mother appeared and told Tofu, Richard and Nat about the previous relationship. Although the mother objected at the beginning, she doesn't mind the fact that her son is with Tofu now. Unexpectedly, Nat didn't listen to everything, and thought that his mother was repeating what he did back then, trying to force the little bear away. So he lost his temper and kissed Tofu in front of his mother. This is great. Everyone is angry, and Nat runs away. But fortunately, he has a good friend Abe, who directly scolded him for Nat's wrong approach. But as arrogant as Nat, she still doesn't know how to bow her head. Not long after, the little bear came after him. Facing Nat, who was playing with his temper, Tofu is a person who is used to pampering and never loses his temper. As for Nat, he allowed himself to export negative emotions to the little bear, and didn't stop until he knocked Tofu out in a racing car. Nat finally calmed down. Under Tofu's enlightenment, he slowly revealed the scar he didn't want to reveal. It turns out that Nat has liked girly things since he was very young, but my father never allowed it. Beat and fought, and made troubles, but Nat still did not change. As Nat grew up, he found that he seemed to like boys. This situation is very unacceptable to parents, so mom and dad changed schools for him overnight, and a friend of his mother asked teacher to watch him. At first, Nat thought it would be a painful time, but unexpectedly, he met the new school here, the senior Dorian on the basketball court. The handsome figure of the senior made Nat's heart beat. What's more, at the critical moment, the senior also saved Nat. This kind of love at first sight made Nat's eyes stay on Dorian, but the other side's eyes didn't look at him. Still, even such a crush is happy, but in this case, Nat is not alone. Dorian's friend Richard also became interested in Nat. Richard will pay attention to Nat unconsciously, and will stand up when the other party is being bullied. Teases Nat in a joking way. He is really kind to Nat. Seeing that Nat's crush on Dorian was hopeless, Richard launched an attack, not only gaining a sense of presence, but also staged a story of a hero saving the beauty. Eventually, Nat fell in love with a man named Richard. With such a strong boyfriend, Nat felt the long-lost relaxation and freedom. The two secretly held hands on campus and celebrated their birthday under a tree. Richard encouraged Nat to be a writer, and everything seemed sweet and exciting. In this way, the underground love of the two lasted for 1 year. Finally one day, in the school classroom, Mr. Chiu found the kissing pair of Richard and Nat, so she told Nat's parents directly about it.
คือผมกับนัทจริงๆเรา
Nat home in full view. Things have come to this point. Richard and Nat breakup has become an inevitable event, so Richard prepared a teddy bear as a gift and wanted to see Nat for the last time. The parting of a lover is very painful, and the last hug is also very precious. But at this time, Nat's father still appeared. Nat home again angrily.
ปล่อยพ่อมาดิบอกให้ปล่อยหน้าไหมฮะมึงเคยคิดจะไว้หน้ากูบ้างไหม
Nat went back to the room, crying bitterly while hugging the bear Richard gave. And Tofu woke up at this time, although his father was very irritable. But after this time, Nat finally made up his mind to resist. He directly stated that he wanted to read his favorite mass media, and Nat bluntly told his parents that if he felt ashamed to have a gay son, he didn't mind that the two were not related by blood, and then moved out. The scene returns to the present, just recalling the past, which makes Nat burst into tears, and little bear can't help but have red eyes. But more importantly, Mom also heard the remarks. She realized how much harm she and the baby's father had caused the child. This is really a poor and sad family. On the other hand, Amos made an appointment with Abe to confess his love. Everything was ready, but he unexpectedly ran into Abe's ex-boyfriend halfway. Seeing this scene, Amos was going to be jealous, not to mention that his ex-boyfriend was here, and it wasn't just the scene of the proposal. Now, he completely misunderstood, and mistakenly thought that the object of marriage proposal was also Abe. Fortunately, Abe also likes Amos, so even if it was a misunderstanding, he explained it clearly and agreed to date him.
อย่าทำอะไรลุ่มล่ามเข้าใจไหมเงียบดูคน
On the other hand, Tofu looked at the disharmonious relationship between Nat and his mother, and was very worried. He wanted to help fix it, but he couldn't do it. Until one day, my mother disappeared from home. It was only then that Nat became anxious, looked around, and finally found her on the side of the road. But my mother was in a trance at this time and was almost hit by a motorcycle. Fortunately, Nat saved her mother with quick eyesight and quick hands, but he himself was injured, and Tofu and his mother accompanied Nat to the hospital. In this situation, he thought of his childhood. The same is true of my mother, who tried her best to protect herself. At this time, the director called and asked Nat to go back and revise the script. The reason is that he feels that Nat seems to have misunderstood the mother in the play, although sometimes the mother is too weak. Every time she makes a move, it is to protect the son from being hurt by the father. Such remarks made Nat a little confused. Could it be that he has misunderstood his mother for so many years? On the other side, Tofu was walking the dog with his mother and enlightening her by the way. In fact, my mother had already changed her mind. Seeing Nat and Tofu smile when they get along, she feels that everything is not so important. As long as Nat is happy, Nat also heard such heartfelt remarks. As night came, Mom had gone back to the room and Nat had just returned. This series of shocks made him a little overwhelmed, but the bear understood him. He knew Nat's hidden care and love, so he made a decision and invited his mother to go shopping for Nat, and my mother was really happy about it. Although this was the shopping that everyone was looking forward to, Nat still didn't come as scheduled. Only Mother and Tofu went to the mall, but not long after, just when everyone thought Nat would not be here, he showed up and put on new shoes for his mother. Today's son not only bought new shoes for his mother, but also a new mobile phone, and the mother is not as incapable of expressing as before. She generously admitted the relationship between Nat and Tofu, and expressed her gratitude to her son after returning home. Sure enough, family relationships have to go back and forth. Finally, the matter between Nat and Mother was resolved, and Tofu was relieved a lot. He even felt that even if he turned back into a bear, he was not in vain. But soon something new happened. On this day, Eri came to Tofu and wanted to introduce someone to him, but she didn't expect that Tofu also wanted to see Richard. It's a pity that the two can't communicate now, because the purpose of Eri's trip is to ask Tofu to help Nat to meet the unconscious Richard and try to wake him up. After hearing the news, Tofu was a little flustered and uneasy. He is not confident enough. Nat loves him, so he is very hesitant whether to help Nat to see Richard. Even when the two were cuddling each other and watching TV, Little Bear was absent-minded. Of course, there are more than these sequelae. Bear's mood began to fluctuate easily, and he had some small willfulness, petty jealousy, and small unreasonable troubles. Nat didn't quite understand it, and the one who didn't understand it was Bear himself. However, Cubs quickly went outside to adjust his mood, and Nat also gave Cubs patience, relaxation and love. He allowed his boyfriend to be a little capricious, and the two got back together. However, Little Bear still has too many unspeakable things in his heart. Nat watched Tofu and his mother stay at home bored all day, and decided to take the two out for a trip. Now, both of them are happy and very excited. So, where to go? In the end, everyone unanimously decided to listen to Tofu, although Xiaoxiong did a lot of mental construction not to bring Nat to meet Richard, but when choosing a location, he still chose Chiang Mai where Richard is. Sure enough, Tofu was still the innocent and kind little bear. Although he was afraid of losing, he finally chose to take Nat to meet Richard. They just don't know if they can still be as sweet as they are now after meeting Richard, and what unpredictable consequences this decision will bring to them. Although this decision has been made, the little bear did not relax because of it, but became preoccupied. He is listless every day and just wants to act like a baby. Only Nat's kiss can give Little Bear the motivation to pack his luggage. But Little Bear didn't expect that he heard the sound of objects in the utility room. But when Nat came, everything returned to calm. In a blink of an eye, it was the day of departure, and Nat came to Chiang Mai with the Little Bear and his mother. And Ari, Amos, and Abe are also here. We first went to the temple together and took many beautiful photos at the same time. For Thai culture, temples are really an important place. Next, everyone obeyed their mother's advice. Unexpectedly, she likes exciting activities. Seeing my mother's long-lost smile, everyone couldn't help laughing. Next, Nat took everyone to Tofu's favorite place, the garden, because he wants to tell Tofu that every flower in the world is different, and Tofu is also the unique one. This sentence made Tofu happy again. At this time, the director sent a message to Nat, asking him to change the script. Bear, who was always with his master, did not go back to the hotel with him this time, but followed Ari to the hospital secretly to meet Richard. Looking at the strange love rival lying on the bed, Tofu felt very uncomfortable. He walked back to the hotel depressed. Nat was still working. What kind of ending Nat will have in the series? Will it be happy? It should be. Nat found the depressed Tofu and hurried over to hug him. But Tofu's mood still didn't improve. He told Nat that he may have some fluctuations, but there is always one person in his mind. So on this day, Tofu took Nat to the hospital and met Richard. But such a sudden meeting made him at a loss, and he didn't know what to do while holding the hand of his ex-boyfriend. Tofu decided to bring Nat to the hospital. He was still very sad to see him get along with others like this. Little Bear couldn't help asking Nat if he still loves Richard, but Nat didn't know either. What he knew and could be sure of was that he loved Cubs very much now. Despite such an episode, everyone's travel continued, and we met Joy and Sam here. When everyone sits together, it is a proper debate field. The young people advocate human rights and equality, and the older generation is sarcastic and incomprehensible. But it doesn't matter. Society must always progress. Finally, Nat mustered up the courage to come out to everyone here, and he really became more and more brave with the company of Bear. Needless to say, such a dinner must end up being unhappy. Unexpectedly, at the end, Joy released a shocking news. That is Nat's life experience. Everyone was shocked that Nat was Sam's son. At this moment, my mother came out to speak. It turned out that Hedda was insecure about the relationship between the two, so every time she saw Sam, she would always be jealous, and mistakenly thought that there was a relationship between the two. Later, after discovering that Nat's sexual orientation was problematic, Hedda became even more angry with her mother, so her mother ran away from home. After returning, Nat and Tofu lay on the bed, exhausted by the strange things that happened recently. But in Tofu's mind, the only thing he cares about is Nat, and he wants Nat to be happy. But when he wanted to kiss each other, Nat avoided it. Despite having a bad mood at night, Bear obediently shared the scenery with Nat early the next morning. Nat also knew that he had done something wrong, so he apologized to Bear and shared his concerns. It turned out that he was afraid that Richard and Tofu used to be a couple. Nat was happy again when he got the Bear's negative assurance, but Tofu's lost memory is still the point of fear in Nat's heart. On this day, Ari brought Nat and Tofu to Richard's house. Here, Tofu discovers that the cactus is also an awake friend, and reminded by the cactus, he had an idea about Richard's injury, and the suspects turned out to be Joy and Sam. At this moment, the person involved also came to Richard's house, and Tofu and others had to leave first. But when they returned to the hotel, they learned from their mother that Richard had come to find Nat 2 years ago.
มาหาใครคะ
สวัสดีครับ
Since his mother was not in a good state of mind at that time, he forgot to tell Nat, which made the two miss again. Nat was very angry, so he lost his temper to his mother and blamed Tofu. Little Xion, who was always gentle, didn't quite understand at this time. Fortunately, their friends were also here, so he took one away and quickly persuaded them. But at this time Nat found that his mother was missing. Good guy. Now everyone is out to find their mother again. Just like an idol drama, everyone is performing and everyone misses it. The mother on the other side was also very anxious. She forgot where she lived until she was sent to the police station. It happened that Uncle Ani was at the police station at this time, so he notified Nat. Nat wanted to lose his temper again, but after questioning, he found that his mother seemed to have a problem with her memory, and that her mother was suffering from Alzheimer's disease. Nat was sad and broke down, holding Tofu and crying bitterly. Back in Bangkok, Nat and Tofu took their mother for a systematic examination. Since the condition is irreversible, they should accept it and delay its development. So, for a long period of time, Nat and Tofu accompanied their mother to exercise regularly. They helped their mothers with intellectual training, and even wore anti-lost bracelets for their mothers. Everything was done in detail. During this time, Tofu found another friend awake in the utility room. That was Sam's wedding present to Hedda and Na, and a blanket that has been through a lot. On this day, Mom was cooking delicious food with Tofu and Nat, and the atmosphere was warm and cozy, but the doorbell rang. Everyone saw that it was Ari, so they chatted with her for a while. Unexpectedly, during this gap, the food on the stove dried up. Nat was terrified, startled and frightened. He uncontrollably exported all his emotions to his mother. After the incident, Nat also regretted it, but he really didn't know what to do. Also, there is a warm little bear at this time. He comforted the owner again and healed him. Early the next morning, Nat finally sorted out his emotions, looked at his cautious mother, and decided to hold a banquet for him. There is no reason, no plan, the kind that comes from the heart. Now the cheerful atmosphere in the house was restored, and everyone laughed. The next step is to invite familiar friends to prepare for the party. But before that, there was one thing missing in this family, and that was a family portrait. Now, we can finally see the handsome Tofu in a formal suit. They took photos seriously together and left few sweet memories. And Nat and Tofu also like each other's formal clothes, and they are reluctant to take off their clothes for a long time. Good guy, the atmosphere is here. What are you waiting for? Soon, the party was held as scheduled. All the familiar friends came to participate, but unexpectedly Joy also came. Although it was a disappointment, Tofu arranged a seat for her to sit down. At the party, my mother announced that she had Alzheimer's disease, and she decided to live in the present from today. More importantly, she finally learned to express her love for Nat, and Nat was also very touched, singing with his mother, and fighting against Alzheimer's disease with his mother. Although there will be more difficulties in the future, the mother and son finally learned how to face them hand in hand. The party, the teacher and Nat meet again, after all these years, and Nat's illness. The teacher finally admitted his prejudice back then, and Nat got the apology he deserved. Outside, Tofu was negotiating with Joy, and he doesn't know whether to call him brave or what. He revealed in and out of words that he knew why Richard was injured. But Tofu, don't you know that there is revenge in human society? On the other hand, Abe and Amos are wrapping up a sweet night and having a sweet meal. But unexpectedly, Ani's father, who didn't go home very much, came back at this time. Seeing this situation, he was very confused, but Amos bravely came out to his father directly. Although his father was frightened by the sudden incident, he neither agreed nor objected. On the other side, Sam's boss Ms. Ching is back. She came back to clean up the mess about Richard. This is the real boss behind the scenes, and the first thing she has to deal with is the insider Tofu. And our Tofu is still having a sweet meal with Nat at this time. A noodle for two, and a sweet little gift. But unexpectedly, when Tofu went out to get gifts, he was threatened and attacked by the man in black.
แกเป็นใครอ่ะแกต้องการอะไร
Fortunately, Nat arrived in time to repel the enemy. Afterwards, the two had to go to the hospital to bandage their wounds. But here Tofu learned a new secret. That is, Richard still needs an operation. Uncle Ani everything. Unexpectedly, Uncle Ani was shot directly after learning that Richard found sawdust in his brain again. Tofu was attacked and everything becomes clear. Sam seems to be the real murderer, but Joy doesn't think so. She knew that Sam only used the vase and her husband was the scapegoat. This is why Naturally, the boss has something to do with Sam. It turned out that Sam really didn't kill Richard. Everything was done by the boss, because she didn't want Richard to organize protests and affect the progress of her project. Reason why Sam will be the scapegoat is because Hedda was really killed by Sam, and the boss knew about it, because Hedda was not good to Na and Nat at all. Sam hurt Hedda for the sake of his beloved woman, poisoned him and died of allergies, and Na knows, that's why she has a mental problem. On the other side, Tofu heard from Miss Blanket, and there was Mr. Backpack, so he went to the utility room again, and the information he heard from two friends allowed Little Bear to piece together the general outline of the story. Nat could bear such a blow, but in the next second, he fainted first because of the pressure brought about by this incident. Although Tofu regained consciousness soon, he learned from Eri that Richard had a sudden reaction. This link is linked together. We really have to kill our cubs. After Cub got this information, he went to Richard's ward when everyone was not paying attention. Sure enough, when the bear scratched his hand, Richard also reacted. Soon, the little bear recovered and was discharged from the hospital, and Nat decided to take him out to play in the two-person world. Tofu was really happy. The two came to Hedda for this important trip. For this trip, Nat carefully prepared gifts, the finished product that he asked everyone to try and help. Not only food, couple bracelets to lock each other is also a very innovative gift. The bear is really happy and sweet. At the same time, he also decided on one thing. He wanted Richard to come back. Therefore, he also cherishes the time with Nat now even more. In other words, after the sweet trip, Nat and Tofu still have to return to reality. On this day, the two will take their mother to the hospital, but unexpectedly, Joy invited Tofu to help. Nat originally disagreed, but Tofu agreed, and before leaving, Tofu said goodbye to Nat. It seemed that he knew what he was about to encounter, but he went resolutely. Sure enough, because Tofu knew too much, Joy became murderous, and Tofu has made up his mind to sacrifice himself to save Richard. So he drank the stuffed drink that Joy gave him. The toxin came on very quickly, and in the blink of an eye, Tofu was already rolling on the ground in pain. At this time in the hospital, Nat just bumped into Uncle Sam. The other party learned that Tofu and Joy were together, and ran back in a panic. At this time, Nat's couple bracelet is also broken. Everything made him feel helpless. So, Nat followed closely behind and followed up. But by the time the two arrived, it was already too late. Tofu was quickly sent to the hospital. The doctor declared him dead. Everyone was saddened to learn of Tofu's death. Nat was in extreme pain. He couldn't bear his little bear. He hugged G alone. He sang songs to accompany him, and he left sad tears. But the little bear did not come back in the end. Bear's death. Sam covered all the crimes, including what Joy did. This was also a relief for him. On the other side, Richard also woke up smoothly and got in touch with Nat again. Abe and Amos also got the understanding and consent of Uncle Ani, and started a happy life. Everything seems to be okay. It's just that our little bear knows. But who can say that bear doesn't know? It turned out that on the day of cremation, Tofu suddenly turned back into a teddy bear and managed to escape, even saving Miss Slipper along the way. Just when Xiong and Xia were struggling with how to get home, Da Huang in the car found them. So Nat returned home with the lost teddy bear. Is no Tofu's ashes in the incinerator. Nat discovers the similarities between Tofu and Bear, and believes that they are one. So Bear returned to the familiar chair and continued to accompany Nat. Of course, sometimes in bed or under the bed. After all the wonders of the teddy bears, round and round, Nat and Richard are still together, and our little bear keeps watching them. In the end, Nat wrote the story about Tofu into a script, hoping that someone will know the story and remember the miracle that happened that morning. Well, this is the end of the content of this issue, and the end of Mr. Miracle Bear. Although the ending is not very happy, the plot of this drama is still okay. Especially the protagonists are very handsome. It is worth watching carefully.